The ships appeared on every screen across Earth at the same time. They were massive, blocking out stars, their hulls shimmering with colors that human eyes struggled to process. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, arranged in perfect geometric patterns at the edge of the solar system. The message came through every communication channel simultaneously, translated into every human language with perfect accuracy. People of Earth, we are the sovereign confluence. We represent 47 species and control 300 star systems. You will surrender all military equipment immediately. You will accept our governance. You will provide 40% of your resources as tribute. You have 12 hours to comply. Resistance is futile. Every species we have encountered has accepted these terms. You will too. In the United Defense Council chamber in Geneva, the message played on the central screen. 50 representatives from every nation on Earth sat in stunned silence. Then someone laughed. It was Ambassador David Chen from the Asian Union. He couldn't help himself. The laugh was genuine, confused, almost childlike in its disbelief. "I'm sorry," Chen said, wiping his eyes. "Did they just demand we surrender? Just like that? No negotiation, no discussion, just give up?" General Sarah Okonkwo from the African Federation leaned back in her chair. She was a tall woman with gray streaks in her hair and scars on her hands from the colony wars. She had seen combat on 3 different worlds. She looked at the alien ships on the screen and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not fear, curiosity. "They think we're going to roll over," she said quietly. "They actually think we're going to just quit." Around the room, the initial shock was wearing off. A representative from South America started chuckling. Then the European delegate. Within minutes, half the room was laughing. Not from joy, but from sheer absurdity. The other half looked worried, but even they seemed more confused than frightened. The confluence ships waited at the edge of the system. Inside the flagship, Archon Veltheros stood on the command deck, his forearms clasped behind his back. He was tall, even for his species, with silver skin that rippled with bioluminescent patterns indicating his high rank. His large eyes watched the sensor readings with satisfaction. "They have received the message," his second-in-command reported, awaiting their surrender transmission. Veltheros nodded slowly. This was the 48th world he had brought into the confluence. It was always the same. The message was sent. The primitive species panicked. Within hours, their leaders would grovel and beg for mercy. He would grant it, of course. The confluence was not cruel. They simply took what was needed and maintained order. It was better this way, cleaner, more civilized. "How long until they respond?" Veltheros asked. "Unknown, Archon, but typically within 3 to 4 hours. Back on Earth, General Okonkwo called for order. The laughter died down, but the atmosphere in the room had changed. The fear that should have been there was replaced by something else. Irritation, almost offense. "Let's be clear," Okonkwo said, standing up. "These aliens just threatened every human being on this planet. We need to take this seriously." "We are taking it seriously," Chen replied. "That's why we need information. Someone run a threat assessment. I want to know what we're dealing with." For the next 6 hours, Earth's best analysts worked frantically. They studied the alien ships, their formation patterns, their energy signatures. They intercepted confluence communications and ran them through translation algorithms. What they found was interesting. The confluence had never lost. Not once in 300 years of expansion. Every species they encountered had surrendered immediately, or after a brief demonstration of power. Their military doctrine was based entirely on overwhelming force and psychological intimidation. They had weapons, certainly, but they had rarely needed to use them. Most of their victories came from simply showing up. "They're bullies," Chen said, reading the report. "Successful bullies, but bullies nonetheless. They have never actually fought a real war." "Neither have we," someone pointed out. "Not in space. Not against aliens," Okonkwo smiled grimly. "That's not quite true. We've been fighting wars for 10,000 years. We just fought them against each other." She pulled up historical records. The world wars, the resource conflicts, the colony wars on Mars and the Belt. Humanity's history was soaked in blood. Billions dead over centuries of endless conflict. Only in the last 50 years had Earth finally achieved something resembling lasting peace. But the infrastructure remained. The weapons, the training, the institutional memory of how to wage total war. "We need to respond," Chen said. "What do we tell them?" "The truth," Okonkwo replied. She drafted a message herself, keeping it simple and direct. It was broadcast to the Confluence fleet exactly 11 hours and 59 minutes after their ultimatum. Thank you for your message. We appreciate you traveling all this way. However, we must respectfully decline your offer. Earth will remain independent. We suggest you leave peacefully. We bear you no ill will, but we will not surrender. Safe travels. On the Confluence flagship, Velthero stared at the message in disbelief. His bioluminescent patterns flickered rapidly, indicating severe confusion. They declined, his second-in-command said unnecessarily. Archon, in 300 years, no species has ever declined. They don't understand, Velthero said slowly. They can't understand? They must be primitives, unable to grasp their situation. What are your orders? Veltheros considered his options. The High Council would not accept failure. The Confluence could not show weakness. If word spread that a species had refused and survived, it would encourage rebellion across their entire empire. We proceed to Phase 2, he said. Prepare a demonstration strike on their Mars colonies. Minimal casualties, maximum visibility. Once they see our power, they will reconsider. And if they don't? Veltheros's patterns shifted to a dark red, indicating certainty and determination. Then we take Earth by force. It will be regrettable but necessary. The Confluence fleet began moving deeper into the solar system. On Earth, alarms started sounding. People took to the streets not in panic but in defiance. Social media exploded with messages, memes, jokes about the aliens. Humanity had been threatened before by asteroids, climate change, nuclear war, pandemics. They had survived it all. Some alien bullies weren't going to change that. In military bases across Earth and Mars, soldiers checked their weapons and boarded ships. They didn't know if they could win, but they knew they wouldn't surrender. It wasn't in their nature. The war was about to begin. The Confluence expected fear. They got memes instead. Within hours of Earth's refusal, social media platforms exploded with jokes. Someone photoshopped Archon Veltheros's face onto a cartoon villain. Another person created a video of the alien ships with silly sound effects. A teenager in Tokyo started a trend called Alien Surrender Challenge, where people mockingly begged the Confluence to spare them while doing ridiculous dances. On the flagship, Veltheros watched these transmissions with growing confusion. His translator struggled with human sarcasm and humor. What he saw looked like mass hysteria or some kind of cultural breakdown. He couldn't comprehend that humans were actually making fun of him. They're laughing, his second-in-command observed. Why are they laughing? Ignore it, Velthero said, though his patterns flickered with uncertainty. It's meaningless noise. Proceed with the demonstration. The Confluence fleet moved toward Mars. The red planet hung in space, dotted with domed cities and sprawling mining operations. From orbit, it looked peaceful, vulnerable. The Confluence sensors detected minimal military presence, a few orbital stations, some defensive satellites. Nothing that could pose a real threat. Velthero selected a small mining outpost on the northern plain. It housed maybe 3,000 colonists. The plan was simple. Destroy the outpost with precise strikes. Show Earth what would happen if they continued to resist. Then offer terms again. They would accept this time. They always did. Begin the attack, Veltheros ordered. 6 Confluence warships broke formation and descended toward Mars. Their weapons charged, ready to reduce the mining outpost to rubble. They were 300 kilometers out when the first missile struck. It came from beneath the Martian surface, erupting from a hidden silo with such speed that Confluence sensors barely registered it. The warhead was nuclear but modified, enhanced with human engineering that made it burn hotter and faster than anything the Confluence had encountered. The lead ship's shields held for exactly 2 seconds before collapsing. The ship itself lasted another 3 seconds before breaking apart in a fireball that lit up the Martian sky. Evasive maneuvers, the squadron leader screamed. But more missiles were already launching. Dozens of them, from silos hidden across the Martian surface. The mining outpost they had targeted suddenly came alive with weapons. Railguns emerged from beneath fake buildings. Laser batteries unfolded from disguised storage units. The mining equipment turned out to be military hardware in civilian camouflage. What the Confluence didn't know was that Mars had been fortified heavily after the colony wars 30 years ago. Every settlement had military-grade defenses. Every colonist had basic combat training. Mars had fought for independence from Earth once, and though they had reconciled, nobody on Mars had forgotten how to fight. The 5 remaining Confluence ships tried to retreat, but Martian defense grids tracked them ruthlessly. 2 more ships were destroyed before they could escape the atmosphere. The last 3 made it back to orbit, damaged and leaking atmosphere. On the flagship, Veltheros watched the disaster unfold in real time. His patterns went dark with shock. In 300 years, the Confluence had never lost ships. Not like this. Not in a mere demonstration strike. Status report, he demanded. His voice strained. 3 ships destroyed, 3 heavily damaged. Casualties estimated at 42,000. The mining outpost is intact and broadcasting victory messages. Veltheros pulled up the broadcast. A human woman appeared on screen. She was old, maybe 60, with gray hair and a face weathered by Mars's harsh environment. She wore a mining suit covered in dust and held a military-grade plasma rifle like it was an extension of her arm. "This is Colony Chief Martinez of Outpost 7, she said calmly. "You just attacked my home. You killed 17 of my people who were outside when your ships approached. I want you to know their names. David Chen, Sarah Williams, Marcus Okafor." She listed all 17 slowly, deliberately. "We will remember them, and we will make you pay for each one." Behind her, hundreds of colonists stood armed and ready. Miners, engineers, farmers, teachers, all holding weapons, all looking grim and determined. The broadcast ended. Another one started immediately. This time it was from Earth. Ambassador Chen appeared, his usual diplomatic smile replaced with cold anger. "Archon Veltheros, that was a mistake. A terrible mistake. You attacked human civilians. You killed 17 people who wanted nothing to do with your war. We gave you a chance to leave peacefully. You chose violence instead, so now we respond in kind. Leave our system now and we will let you go. Stay and we will destroy you. You have 12 hours to decide." On Mars, the colonists were celebrating their victory. But in the command center, General Okonkwo was coordinating the defense with military precision. She had known the Confluence would attack Mars first. It was the obvious target far from Earth, seemingly vulnerable. That's why she had reinforced it heavily in the weeks since detecting the alien fleet's approach. "They didn't do their homework," her tactical officer said. "They saw a mining colony and assumed it was soft." "They don't understand us," Okonkwo replied. "They think we're like the other species they've conquered. Peaceful. Civilized. They don't realize we've been fighting, or since before we learned to write." She pulled up intelligence reports on captured Confluence soldiers. 3 had survived the destroyed ships and been recovered by Martian rescue teams. They were being held in a medical facility, treated for their injuries. 1 had agreed to an interview with a human journalist. The interview was already going viral. The Confluence soldier, a young male with blue skin and 3 eyes, sat in a hospital bed looking confused and frightened. The journalist, an elderly man named Robert Shaw, sat across from him with a gentle smile. "Why did you think we would surrender?" Shaw asked. "You have no natural weapons," the alien replied through a translator. "No claws, no fangs, no armor on your skin. You are small and weak. Your bodies break easily. You are clearly prey species. We are predators." "It is the natural order," Shaw laughed. It was a kind laugh, almost grandfatherly. "Son, let me explain something about humans. We didn't become the dominant species on our planet by being the strongest. We became dominant by being the smartest, the most adaptable, and yes, the craziest. We hunted animals 10 times our size with nothing but sharp sticks and teamwork. We survived ice ages, plagues, asteroid impacts, and nuclear war. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times over and came back every time. You want to know our natural weapon? It's this," he tapped his head. "We think, we plan. We improvise. We never give up. And most importantly, we remember. Every war we've fought, every battle we've lost, every mistake we've made, we remember it all. We learn from it, and we make sure it never happens the same way twice." The alien soldier stared at him in silence. Shaw smiled again. "You made a mistake coming here, but it's not too late. Go home. Tell your people what you saw. Tell them humans offered peace and you chose war. Maybe they'll be smarter than you were." Back on the flagship, Veltheros watched the interview 3 times. Each time he felt a growing sense of unease. The High Council was demanding he proceed with the invasion. They could not afford to show weakness. But something the old journalist said kept echoing in his mind. They remember. Veltheros looked at his fleet. He had lost 3 ships and suffered hundreds of casualties attacking a single mining outpost. Earth had hundreds of cities, thousands of military installations, billions of humans all apparently willing and able to fight. What had he gotten himself into? Archon, orders? His second-in-command asked. Veltharos straightened. He had no choice. The Council demanded victory. We proceed to Earth, full invasion. Commit the entire fleet. As his ships moved toward the blue planet, Veltharos tried to ignore the growing dread in his hearts. The Confluence fleet entered Earth's atmosphere in waves, hundreds of ships descending through clouds that had seen missiles and bombers for centuries. They expected desperate chaos. They got organized hell instead. The first wave hit Earth's defense grid at dawn over the Pacific. What the Confluence didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment since 1947, when the first UFO scare started. Every generation since had added layers to Earth's defenses, hidden in plain sight, disguised as civilian infrastructure or buried deep underground. Satellites that looked like communication relays suddenly revealed themselves as weapon platforms. They fired relativistic projectiles, tiny masses accelerated to near light speed. When they hit Confluence shields, the impact released energy equivalent to nuclear weapons. 3 ships were destroyed in the first 30 seconds. From the ground, railguns hidden in mountains opened fire. Missiles erupted from silos that weren't supposed to exist. Laser batteries powered by entire power plants carved through alien hulls like paper. The sky above Earth became a light show of destruction and death. On the flagship, Veltharos watched his ships die and felt something he had never experienced before. True fear. How do they have these weapons? Our intelligence said they were barely capable of spaceflight. They lied to us, his tactical officer replied, voice shaking. Or we underestimated them. Archon, we're losing ships faster than we can coordinate. We need to retreat and reassess. No. Veltharos slammed a fist against his console. The Council will not accept retreat. We push forward. Commit ground forces. Take their cities. It was the worst decision he could have made. Confluence soldiers dropped into major cities in armored pods, expecting to overwhelm primitive defenses with superior numbers and technology. They landed in New York, Tokyo, Lagos, Mumbai, São Paulo, and dozens of other cities. Within hours, they learned what urban warfare meant to humans. In New York, Confluence soldiers advanced down Fifth Avenue in formation, their armor gleaming, their weapons ready. They were met by a strange mixture of resistance. Professional soldiers in modern gear fought alongside police officers, firefighters, and civilians with hunting rifles. An old man in a wheelchair fired a modified shotgun from a third-floor window. A teenager threw homemade explosives from a rooftop. A group of construction workers had turned their equipment into improvised weapons. The Confluence fought by doctrine, by the book, using tactics that had worked on 47 other worlds. Humans ignored the book entirely. They used guerrilla tactics learned from centuries of asymmetric warfare. They hid in buildings, struck from sewers, used the terrain like it was part of their body. Every human seemed to know how to fight, or at least willing to learn very quickly. In Tokyo, a Confluence commander reported back to the flagship. They're using psychological warfare. They play music during battles. They broadcast messages in our language telling us to surrender. They show us images of our fallen soldiers to demoralize us. This is against all accepted rules of warfare. Rules? A human voice broke into the communication. You want to talk about rules? You invaded our home. You threatened our families. There are no rules anymore. The Confluence discovered something else disturbing. Humans had studied them. In the weeks since the initial contact, Earth scientists had analyzed every Confluence communication, every energy signature, every piece of data they could gather. They had developed biological weapons specifically designed to target Confluence physiology. Airborne viruses that didn't kill but caused severe disorientation. Sonic weapons tuned to Confluence hearing frequencies. Chemical agents that degraded their armor. These weapons are banned. A Confluence officer protested during a radio exchange. The Galactic Convention prohibits biological and chemical warfare. General Okonkwo's voice came back cold and clear. We're not part of your convention. And we banned those weapons too for use against ourselves. You're not human. Different rules apply. It was brutal logic but effective. The Confluence was learning that humans drew sharp distinctions between us and them. They could be incredibly compassionate to their own kind, and utterly ruthless to those who threatened them. 3 weeks into the invasion, the war had settled into a grinding stalemate. The Confluence controlled some territory but couldn't advance. Humans couldn't push them off-world but wouldn't surrender. Casualties on both sides were mounting terribly. The Confluence had lost 30% of their invasion force. Earth had lost millions of civilians and soldiers. Veltharos sat in his command chair, exhausted. His patterns had dulled to almost black, indicating deep stress and confusion. He watched footage of human soldiers fighting in the ruins of Mumbai. What struck him wasn't their ferocity, though that was impressive. It was their adaptability. Confluence soldiers fought the same way every time, following established tactics. Human soldiers never fought the same way twice. They learned, adjusted, improvised. When Confluence shields proved effective against bullets, humans switched to explosives. When Confluence armor could withstand explosives, humans used concentrated acid. When the Confluence adapted to that, humans went back to bullets but attacked from different angles. One video showed a battle in an African city. A young human soldier, barely old enough to be called an adult, charged a Confluence position armed only with a knife. The Confluence shot him 3 times, but he kept coming, driven by adrenaline or madness or something else. He killed 2 Confluence soldiers before dying. His squad mates used the distraction to flank and destroy the position. They fight like every battle is their last, a Confluence commander had reported, like they have nothing to lose. But that wasn't quite right, Veltharos realized. They fought like they had everything to lose. Their homes, their families, their world. That desperation made them dangerous in ways the Confluence had never encountered. He pulled up historical records that human prisoners had provided. Wars that lasted decades, conflicts that killed millions, weapons designed to end all life on the planet. Humans had brought themselves to the brink of extinction multiple times and survived every time. The Confluence had never faced anything like this, because no species in their empire had ever been this violent, this adaptable, this stubborn. Most species in the galaxy evolved as prey or herd animals. They avoided conflict when possible, surrendered when necessary. Humans were different. They were persistence hunters who had climbed to the top of their food chain through sheer determination. A message arrived from the High Council. They were displeased with the lack of progress. They demanded results. They authorized Veltharos to use any means necessary to secure Earth's surrender. He knew what that meant. The planet-killer weapons, massive devices that could crack a world's crust and make it uninhabitable. The Confluence had only used them twice in their history, both times as final solutions against species that refused to be pacified. Veltharos looked at Earth on his screens. The blue planet, scarred now with the fires of war, but still beautiful, still defiant. He thought about the humans he had observed, their strange mix of brutality and compassion, their willingness to die for each other, their absolute refusal to kneel. For the first time in his long career, Veltharos wondered if the Confluence was wrong. If maybe, just maybe, some species were meant to remain free. But the Council had given orders, and he had sworn to obey. 3 months into the war, Earth was bleeding but unbowed. Cities lay in ruins. Billions were displaced. Entire regions were uninhabitable. Yet humanity kept fighting with a ferocity that terrified the Confluence more each day. The war had spread beyond Earth's surface. Human pilots had taken to space in ships that were barely functional. Held together with desperation and ingenuity, they attacked Confluence vessels with tactics that defied all military logic. Kamikaze runs, ramming attacks, suicide missions that seemed insane until they succeeded. A human pilot named Marcus Webb became infamous among Confluence forces. He flew a converted mining ship loaded with explosives and crashed it directly into a Confluence carrier, destroying both himself and the ship. The humans made him a hero. They named an entire squadron after him. Dozens more pilots followed his example, turning their own ships into guided missiles. They have no fear of death, a Confluence psychologist reported to Veltharos. Or rather, their fear of failure and dishonor exceeds their fear of dying. I've never encountered this in any species. It's biologically illogical. Veltharos was beginning to understand that humans operated on a different kind of logic entirely. They valued abstract concepts like freedom and dignity more than their own survival. It made them unpredictable, dangerous. The Confluence supply lines were stretched impossibly thin. They were fighting thousands of light years from home while humans fought on their own doorstep. Every ship the Confluence lost was irreplaceable. Every soldier who died could not be reinforced. Meanwhile, Earth's population kept producing soldiers, weapons, and the sheer stubborn will to continue. Then came the day Veltharos's flagship was hit. A human strike force had penetrated deep into Confluence-controlled space using stealth technology they shouldn't have possessed. They targeted the flagship specifically, coordinating an attack from 6 different angles simultaneously. The ship's shields held, but barely. Veltharos was thrown from his command chair as explosions rocked the vessel. Emergency systems kicked in. Damage reports flooded in. The flagship was crippled, life support failing, engines dead. The remaining crew worked frantically to keep the ship functional. In the chaos, a human boarding party cut through the outer hull. They fought through corridors with weapons and tactics that seemed crude but effective. The Confluence security forces tried to stop them, but were overwhelmed by sheer aggression. The humans moved like they knew they were going to die and wanted to take as many enemies with them as possible. Veltharos found himself face to face with a human soldier. The woman was young, covered in blood and burns, her armor cracked. She pointed a weapon at him with steady hands. "Don't move," she said. Her translator made her voice sound mechanical, but he could hear the steel underneath. "You're coming with us." Veltharos considered resistance but saw the look in her eyes. She wanted him to try. She wanted an excuse. He raised his forearms slowly in surrender. The human strike force evacuated with Veltharos as their prisoner, fighting their way back to their ships. Half of them died getting him out. They treated those deaths as acceptable losses. Veltharos couldn't comprehend that kind of sacrifice for a single prisoner. He was taken to a human military facility deep underground. The security was intense but professional. They didn't torture him. They didn't even threaten him. They simply locked him in a cell with basic amenities and left him alone with his thoughts for 3 days. On the 4th day, General Okonkwo came to see him. She sat down across from him in a simple chair, looking tired but composed. There was no hatred in her eyes, just weariness. "I wanted to meet you," she said, "the person responsible for all this death." "I followed orders," Veltharos replied. "I am a soldier like you." "No," Okonkwo said firmly. "Not like me. I defend. You invade. There's a difference." They talked for hours. Veltharos found himself explaining the Confluence, their history, their philosophy, how they brought order to chaos, how they united species under one banner, how they prevented wars through overwhelming force. Okonkwo listened patiently. Then she told him about Earth, about humanity's long, bloody history, wars that lasted generations, conflicts that nearly destroyed the species, the slow, painful journey toward peace. "We tried your way," she said, "many times. Empires that conquered and ruled through force. They all fell eventually, because you can't force people to be peaceful. Real peace comes from choice, from mutual respect, not from the barrel of a gun." "Then why do you fight so hard?" Veltharos asked. "You say you value peace, yet you wage war with more brutality than any species I've encountered." Okonkwo smiled sadly. "That's what makes us human. We can hold 2 opposing truths at once. We hate war and we're good at it. We value life and we know how to take it. We want peace, but we'll fight to the death for freedom. You see that as a contradiction. We see it as balance." She took him on a tour of a human hospital. Confluence soldiers lay in beds next to human patients receiving the same care, the same medical treatment. Veltharos saw human doctors working frantically to save Confluence lives, spending the same effort they would on their own people. In one room, a human nurse sat with a dying Confluence soldier, holding his hand as he passed. She spoke softly to him in his own language, words of comfort. Afterward, she cried. Veltharos watched her weep for an enemy soldier and felt something break inside him. "I don't understand you," he said to Okonkwo. "You kill us without mercy on the battlefield, then weep for us in hospitals. Which is the real humanity?" "Both," she replied simply. "We're capable of great compassion and great cruelty. We try to be better, to choose compassion. But when someone threatens our home, our families, we become what we need to be to survive. That's the price of being human." The conversation was interrupted by urgent alarms. A priority message came through from Earth's defense network. Confederation orbital sensors had detected a massive energy buildup from the Confluence fleet. Not weapons fire. Something bigger. Much bigger. Okonkwo's face went pale. "Planet killer," she whispered. "They're going to destroy Earth." Veltharos felt sick. He knew the High Council had been considering it, but he hadn't thought they would actually authorize it. "How long?" 3 hours until it's fully charged." Veltharos stood up. "You need to evacuate. Get everyone off the planet." "There's still time. There are 10 billion people on Earth," Okonkwo interrupted. We don't have the ships to evacuate even 1% of them in 3 hours. We're not running. Ambassador Chen appeared on a screen broadcasting from the United Defense Council. His usual calm was replaced by cold fury. He sent a message directly to the Confluence High Council. You can kill us. You probably will. But understand this. We have humans on Mars, on the Belt, on colony ships headed to other stars. You'll never get them all. And they will remember what you did here. They will hunt you. They will find you. They will make you pay. Not today, maybe not for 100 years, but humans never forget. And we never forgive genocide. The message ended. Earth began preparing for the end. Not with panic, but with grim determination. Military forces launched every remaining ship and weapon in one final assault on the Confluence fleet. It was a suicide mission. Everyone knew it. They went anyway. In his cell, Veltharos made a decision that would brand him a traitor forever. The planet-killer weapon hung in space like a malignant star, energy building within its core. It was ancient Confluence technology, built for extinction-level events. Once fired, it would crack Earth's crust and boil its oceans. Nothing would survive. On Earth, people gathered with their families. Some prayed. Some cried. Many simply held each other and watched the sky. They had fought for 3 months. They had given everything. Now it seemed it wasn't enough. The human fleet launched its final assault. Every pilot knew they weren't coming back. They didn't care. If they were going to die, they would make the Confluence remember the cost. Ships that were barely spaceworthy tore through space toward the planet killer. Missiles and railgun rounds filled the void. Human pilots screamed defiance over open channels, their voices raw with rage and grief. They crashed into Confluence vessels with deliberate precision, trading their lives for enemy casualties. It was magnificent and terrible to watch. The Confluence had never seen anything like it. An entire species choosing to die on their feet rather than live on their knees. In the underground facility, Veltharos watched the assault on a monitor. He saw human ships dying by the dozens, their crews vaporizing in silent explosions. He saw their determination, their absolute refusal to give up even in the face of certain doom. He thought about the nurse who had wept for his dying soldier. About General Okonkwo, who spoke of wanting peace while preparing for war. About Ambassador Chen's promise that humans would remember, would hunt, would never stop. The Confluence had made a terrible mistake. They had threatened not just a civilization, but a species that had survived extinction events before, a species that learned from every defeat, a species that would never, ever forget. Veltharos turned to his guard, a young human soldier. I need to speak with General Okonkwo immediately. I can stop this. The guard looked skeptical but made the call. Okonkwo arrived within minutes running. What did you say? I have override codes, Veltharos said quickly. For the planet killer. I can shut it down, but you need to let me transmit now before it's too late. Why would you do that? Okonkwo demanded. Your own people will execute you. Yes, Veltharos agreed. His patterns flickered with resignation. But the High Council has gone insane. This isn't war anymore. This is genocide. Both yours and potentially ours. If you all die, your colonies will hunt us forever. They'll never stop. Your Ambassador Chen was right. And if I allow this weapon to fire, I'm complicit in the extinction of a sentient species. That's not what I signed up for. That's not what the Confluence was supposed to be. Okonkwo studied him for a long moment. Then she grabbed his arm. Come with me now. They ran to the communications center. Veltharos was given access to a transmitter powerful enough to reach the Confluence fleet. He broadcast his override codes on emergency channels, using his personal authorization as Archon. The planet-killer weapon began to power down, but Veltharos wasn't finished. He broadcast a message to the entire Confluence fleet, not just the weapon operators. His voice carried the weight of command and the exhaustion of someone who had seen too much death. This is Archon Veltharos. I am ordering all Confluence forces to stand down and begin withdrawal from human space. The planet-killer weapon has been disabled. The High Council has authorized genocide, and I cannot follow that order. We came here to bring humans into the Confluence. Instead, we've proven ourselves to be exactly what they accused us of being. Conquerors. Tyrants. We have learned nothing from 300 years of expansion except how to bully weaker species. Humans have shown us something different. They've shown us what real strength looks like. The strength to choose peace, but the will to fight for freedom. the strength to show mercy to enemies while defending their home without compromise. I will not be party to their extinction." He paused. "To any confluent soldier listening to this, you have a choice. Follow the High Council's orders and become mass murderers, or follow your conscience and withdraw. History will judge us by what we do in the next few hours." The message ended. Silence filled the communications center. On monitors, they watched the Confluence fleet's response. Some ships began to withdraw immediately. Others hesitated. A few opened fire on the retreating vessels, calling them traitors. The Confluence fleet began to fracture, ship fighting ship, as centuries of unquestioned authority collapsed in minutes. The human assault continued, taking advantage of the chaos. They didn't know about Veltharos's message yet. They only knew the planet killer had stopped charging. They pressed their advantage ruthlessly, destroying command ships and cutting through the confusion. By the time ceasefire orders finally spread through both fleets, the Confluence had lost another 20 ships. The remaining forces retreated to the outer system, broken and demoralized. The invasion was over. Earth had survived. The cost was staggering. 10 million humans dead, 30 major cities destroyed, entire regions contaminated. The Confluence had lost 60% of their invasion force, nearly 300 ships and 500,000 soldiers. Veltharos was arrested by his own people and charged with high treason. The High Council demanded his immediate execution, but Ambassador Chen intervened. He offered Veltharos political asylum on Earth, making him the first alien refugee in human history. The trial that followed was broadcast across the galaxy. Veltharos stood before both human and Confluence courts. He accepted responsibility for his role in the invasion. He accepted that he had caused countless deaths, but he maintained that stopping the planet killer was the right choice. "I believed the Confluence brought order," he said during testimony. "I believed we made the galaxy safer, but we only made it more obedient. Humans showed me the difference. They taught me that some things are worth fighting for, worth dying for, and I couldn't be the person who ended that, even if it meant betraying everything I was raised to believe." The Confluence found him guilty and sentenced him to death in absentia. Earth granted him asylum and protection. It was a strange outcome. Neither victory nor defeat, just survival and consequences. In the aftermath, the galaxy changed. The Confluence fractured as member species began questioning their membership. Some left the coalition entirely. Others demanded reforms. The iron grip that had held 47 species together for 3 centuries began to loosen. Earth emerged as a new power, not through conquest, but through having survived. Other species looked at humanity with a mixture of fear and respect. Here was a civilization that had been threatened with extinction and laughed, then fought, then won. It was unprecedented. Peace negotiations began, but they were tense. Earth demanded reparations, war crime trials, and guarantees of independence. The Confluence, weakened and divided, had little choice but to comply. It would take decades to heal the wounds on both sides. General Okonkwo retired 6 months after the war ended. She spent her last day in uniform at a memorial built for both human and Confluence dead. Thousands of names carved in stone, thousands more yet to be added. She traced her finger over some of them, remembering faces, voices, last words. A young Confluence refugee approached her. He was one of many who had chosen to stay on Earth rather than return to the Confederation. "General, I have a question." "I'm not a general anymore," Okonkwo said gently. "Just Sarah. Why did you spare us?" he asked. "After everything we did, after all the people we killed, you could have destroyed us when we were broken. Instead, you offered mercy. Why?" Okonkwo looked up at the sky. Human ships were moving through orbit, beginning the reconstruction. Confederation ships were there too, monitored but no longer enemies. Just neighbors learning to coexist. "Because we remember what it's like to be the monsters," she said quietly. "Humans spent thousands of years hurting each other. We committed genocides. We built weapons to end our own world. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times. We know what it's like to be consumed by violence and hate. And we decided finally that we didn't want to be that anymore. That doesn't mean we've forgotten how. It just means we choose differently now." She turned to face the young alien. "You came to our world expecting to find prey. You found predators instead. But we're not mindless killers. We're thinking, feeling beings who happen to be very, very good at survival. That means we can choose mercy even when we're angry. We can rebuild even when we're hurt. We can forgive even when we can't forget. The young confluence nodded slowly, processing this. And if someone threatens you again? Okonkwo's smile was tired but genuine. Then we'll remember this war. And we'll show them exactly what happens when you mistake our kindness for weakness. Because we tried peace. We offered you a chance to leave. You chose violence. And you learned that humans don't surrender. We don't give up. We just keep fighting until we win or there's nothing left to fight for. She walked away, leaving the memorial behind. Above, the ships continued their work. Humanity was moving into the stars now, no longer contained to one system. They were exploring, colonizing, building, but every ship carried weapons. Every colony was fortified. Every human who looked at the stars remembered the confluence, remembered the invasion, remembered the cost of freedom. The aliens had ordered Earth to yield. The aliens had threatened. Humans had laughed. Then humans had taught the galaxy what happens when you wake the sleeping giant. And the galaxy woo.